The following is rated not safe for work. It contains strong language, adult situations, and lots of spoilers. Discretion is advised.
In the criminal justice system, cinematic-based offenses are considered especially heinous. The dedicated attorneys who investigate these villainous films are members of an elite squad known as the Reels of Justice. These are their stories.
Order, please, order. The Reels of Justice is now in session. Judge, we made ya! Ryan Luis Rodriguez presiding. We all rise for the Honorable Judge Rodriguez.
I was expecting something more insulting. Be seated.
We'll work on it.
Welcome to the Reels of Justice. Today we are hearing the case of The People vs. Maximum Overdrive, a 1986 horror movie about trucks and other machines coming to life to rain terror down on humans trapped in a roadside diner. For those of you unfamiliar with our court proceedings, we are here to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. As always, in this courtroom, films are to be considered excellent until proven awful, and the burden of proof lies upon the prosecution to prove beyond a shadow of a reasonable doubt that this film is guilty. Mr. Maynard Bangs, you are representing the prosecution. You may present your opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is a story about a girl named Truckee. Early morning, she revs up, vroom, 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 down the road. Blood-soaked mud flaps, shining chrome. It's you they're all running from. They cry, "Oh no, it's Truckee, 18 wheels of doom." And they scream, "Here comes Truckee. She's alive and she drives, drives, drives till you don't survive, thinking I'm a living, breathing, killing machine, or are aliens controlling me? Breaker, breaker, she'll break your spine. Time is up when she puts the hammer down. And she keeps on swerving on the undeserving. This convoy of carnage never stops. They cry, "Oh no, it's Truckee, 18 wheels of doom."
Woo!
And they scream, "Here comes Truckee. She's alive and she drives, drives, drives till you don't survive, thinking, am I living, breathing, killing machine, or are aliens controlling me?" There you go, Your Honor.
Nice. Seems like you're in favor of the movie, though.
How many times do you say
because there was problem with aliens. I love the phrase "blood-soaked mud flaps."
Thank you, Mr. Bangs. Appearing on behalf of the defense is Mrs. Emily Marsh. Please present your opening statement.
Wow, can I just say, that song, incredibly moving. Where do I begin? Honestly, that song really encapsulated for me. I have many reasons that I will present to the court for why this is a good movie. Against all the odds, I'll say that this is a good movie. And honestly, there are just some memorable characters in here. And I'm not talking about the actors per se, but Truckee is a star. And I'm so glad that we're starting that out on the right foot here. Just really, there's some inanimate objects that really deserved an Oscar in this film. So I'm very excited to go through all of the delicious chocolate box of details that I think make this an excellent film. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Marsh. Mr. Bangs, you may proceed with your first exhibit.
Thank you. I'm kind of out of shit, Your Honor. So let's just start with the beginning. So this movie is based on a short story by Stephen King called Trucks, which is about some people trapped in a truck stop. And for some reason, all the trucks in the world seem to come alive. And so it was written by Stephen King, and then it was adapted into a movie directed by Stephen King. This is the only movie Stephen King ever got to direct, and there's probably a reason. I think he calls it mindless and moronic and kind of disowns it. But that's Stephen King's opinion. My problem with it is that he managed to screw up his own story. I mean, he wrote this short story and he still manages to adapt it poorly to the screen. Because in the short story, there are not any aliens. There is not a comet. You know, there's a couple of quick title cards in this beginning and end of this movie that I don't know when they got added to in the production necessarily. But it sure seems like it was kind of last minute where they're like, oh, let's make it UFOs. You know, people, there's got to be a reason, Stephen. You know, the producer, Hilarionitis, might have pushed for that. And the reason I don't like it being aliens is, one, it's more scary not to know why the trucks are alive. But also, it's a lot harder for me to nitpick the logic if you make it like magic, right? King's got this history of living vehicles like Christine, right? That came out just a few years before this. Very similar car. But in Christine, it gets possessed. It's like demons or it's evil, supernatural powers. It's magic, right? So it's hard to say, hey, that's impossible. But I don't see at all how these aliens would be able to remotely control the vehicles in the way that we see in this movie.
Mrs. Marsh, did Stephen King shoot himself in the foot by introducing aliens into the mix?
You know, I think what's being brought up a lot by the prosecution is all of the reasons, logically on paper, that this movie should not be a good movie. As it's been brought up, this is Stephen King's only directorial debut, which he's notorious for ripping apart other people's directorial choices with his work and adaptations. All of these things, they should make for a bad movie. And yet, let's even just talk about that detail of, is it aliens? Is it the comet? Is it not? We're talking about that first sort of like intro card where it introduces that it's aliens. And then at the end, we have an exit card that essentially is like, we don't really know what it was. And I think that's why
the end card says there was a UFO that someone blew up, and then all the things stopped, suggesting the UFO caused it.
But then in the comet, but the UFO, all of this to say is that if this movie, there's that wonderful sweet spot of a movie where if it goes too far, it now becomes something beautiful and watchable. And in the case of this movie, the very fact that the movie itself cannot agree as to why these machines are coming to life is sort of like when I pitch this movie to people, that is one of the details I bring up. It's like the movie itself doesn't know why the machines are doing what they're doing. And people are like, how does that make any sense? And I'm like, it doesn't, and it's great to watch. Like the way that this movie just lets go of logic and is essentially the whole mantra is, does it feel good? Yes, then we're gonna do it. And as a result, because this movie is not preoccupied with logic or like, you know, the rules of the universe, like why is it that a lawnmower is considered a machine, even though it doesn't have electricity, I guess, so you can't unplug it. But the movie doesn't care. And I'm so glad that it doesn't, because that lawnmower scene might be one of the greatest cinematic moments, like objectively, just a fantastic cinematic moment in all comedy horror of all time. So, Your Honor, I know it doesn't logically make sense, but what does your heart racing to the pulse of AC/DC tell you? It feels right. It feels right.
Well,
I rest my case.
No, not yet. That's too soon.
Not yet.
But one person who does not like that lawnmower scene, by the way, I think he's the cinematographer, Nanuzzi, who ended up losing his right eye because a splinter
Oh,
of
geez.
wood got shot off by that lawnmower. And everybody on the crew told Stephen King to take the blade off the lawnmower, and King told them no. And even the guy who lost his eye was like, hey, you can't see the blade. And he's like, nah, keep it in. So he didn't like that.
No,
You're right,
really
you'll
can't
feel
do
it.
right?
And he did.
Blood, sweat, and tears. You know what? It's just like when Viggo Mortensen broke his toe. We can always say that when we watch that scene. You know,
You're
it just
right.
adds to it.
This guy lost his eye. But I think I like your logic or what you say. My problem with it is there aren't any rules. You're right. I don't really mind the lawnmower starting because I think you could probably jumpstart it, but there's absolutely no way for it to propel forward and roll forward without just sort of like a magnetic guiding hand. You know, if this magnetic guiding hand can push a lawnmower forward, if it can, push a button down, despite the fact that buttons work with springs, there's no way for that to pull inside internally. That's not how springs work. Then it can make it do almost anything. I mean, the kitchen knife moves like a snake, through lateral undulation. It lashes out. If it's more than just turning the device on, right? The rules seem to suggest that the aliens or ghost hand can actually lift these things occasionally, except for when it can't, when it can't pump its own gas.
But I would say that, how many times have we sat down and said wow, I watched that movie, all of its rules made sense, and we'd be like, was it good? No. I think there's plenty of examples where a movie logically making sense from step to step doesn't necessarily make it a good movie. It means that its logic is sound. And I think Maximum Overdrive came out at such a sweet spot for movies that logically make no sense, but are such good movies. I put forward another example to the court of this 1980s time. Illogical movies don't make any sense. Over the top.
All right.
Why is over the top? Really, we're really going to believe that there's some sort of underground betting scene where they're doing, arm wrestling, but it just feels so good. It feels so right. And that movie just embraces it. I think the 80s were just a time of, I don't know. I'm just thinking of
cocaine use.
Anything was possible, man. The pacing of this movie, and we can thank cocaine for that, because the logic may be off in this movie, but the pacing is excellent. We do not linger.
I think there are moments where they're just kind of sitting around in the truck stop, and it's usually when they're kind of they're kind of trying to make up hypotheses of what's happening, that you kind of do lose that pacing. And that's kind of really where you see that the characters don't have a lot going on, and the trucks are more alive than the people in this movie. I think, as you said, Truckee is the star of this movie. I don't really remember
1,000%.
anything Emilio Estevez does, and Truckee only has one expression, but Emilio has none. But the last thing I want to touch on the aliens too, by making it aliens again, because remember, we didn't have to, because Stephen King wrote the damn short story without aliens, and then he directed the movie. For him to complain about director meddling, he meddled it. It's his movie. But to make it aliens, I mean, if they're aliens and their point is just to wipe us out, I mean, they could just make all these things explode. They don't need to drive into things. They could all just blow up. If every machine on Earth blew up, we'd all be dead. I don't know if that would be plan 10, 11, or 12 from outer space, but it's still a bad one.
It's true, but I feel and honestly, what you also brought up too, which I would also say is one of the reasons that makes this such a good movie, which is debatable. I look to the court, I look to the jury. Is it fair to bring in the situations that made a movie to give it justification for being a good movie? I would argue yes in the case of this movie, because we learn about a movie before we watch it, and Maximum Overdrive is a classic case of talk about all the hype. As it's been brought up, Stephen King failed at adapting his own short story, and that also makes this movie just so much more delicious to watch, because in a way, we don't want it to be like a perfectly flawless, like Dr. Sleep adaptation of a Stephen King novel. The very fact that he himself like couldn't help but go off of his own material to make something that was completely different than his own writings, that he also gave into that temptation when making a movie, I think also makes this movie so light and enjoyable, and just that, it has nothing dragging it down, basically. So I think all of that coming together is, in a way, was Stephen King trolling us with this movie, and I think that's beautiful.
Light and enjoyable, just like non-dairy creamer. Mr. Bangs, any
I
further
have been
comments?
drinking non-dairy creamer all evening. I'll get off the aliens here quick because I do another problem I have with them switching it. Now, I would say the short story has like sort of a sub-theme of like technophobia, right? Like what happens when our technology turns against us, right? When it happens when it betrays us. I lied. I'm kind of going to go back to the aliens. When the aliens
You couldn't help it.
aliens are controlling our technology against us, then our technology is not really betraying us. It's like when the bad guy takes the gun in a scuffle. You're not like, oh, gun, why you betray me? It's the bad guy. He's the bad guy. He's the one who's taking the gun. This is the alien's fault, not technology. In addition to that, most of the problems in this movie, unlike the short story, are solved by technology. The grenade that blows up the platform truck, that's technology. The RPG that blows up like all of the trucks, even Truckee. And by the way, that's not the kind of rocket launcher you can reload. It's a one-time use and throw out one, which is like, it's so easy to know what kind of rocket launcher that is. That's also technology. The underground sewer tunnels that they crawl through to get out of the diner, that was brought to you by technology. Whereas in the book, they kind of use a few Molotov cocktails, but in this case, they happen to be at the only gas station with heavy munitions. So they clearly get this great deus ex machina out of it. And the irony there is that the machina is what gets them out of it.
That's true, but I would say that the prosecution is bringing all of the energy to, honestly, the one failing of this movie, which is if you saw the plot written out for you, like focusing on the detail and logic of this movie, in which case I would agree. Read the synopsis of Maximum Overdrive and absolutely throw it in jail, throw it away and throw away the key. But that's not all that a movie is it, ladies and gentlemen? It's not just about that synopsis. It's not just about these logical rules. There's a lot more that's going on there. And that, focusing on those elements, are effects. My goodness, the death scenes in this movie are fantastic, interspersed throughout the movie, because it knows that the true stars of this movie are those sweet, sweet machines that are being turned against us. And I would argue, when you watch this movie, those are the heroes of this film. Just in terms of like who actually has the most sympathy in this film is like the ATM from the beginning of this movie. It just strikes such a knowing tone already that this isn't going to be a logical film. Like, you shouldn't be sitting down and like putting on your reading glasses and taking notes as you watch it. It's telling you it's telling you that it's going to be a crazy AC/DC fueled ride through. I mean, at some point, honestly, Yeardley Smith does scream in the movie, "What is going on?" And we have the response, "I don't know." And that is Maximum Overdrive. And yet, how many times have I watched this film? I'm probably embarrassed to say, I think it's probably around 10.
That is a lot. I'm glad you brought up Yeardley Smith too, because I like Lisa episodes, but she is not a scream queen, and it was not a useful display of her talents here. I mean, her character is relatively one-dimensional, but in that case, I'm just going to really blame the director for pretty much all the performances. Anyway, I mean, Pat Hingle does fine because he's kind of an experienced actor anyway. But a lot of the younger people, they needed a director to help them out here.
Well, but I would say another performance that I just need to shout out, which I think also, again, an iconic moment of Maximum Overdrive that I think we can all agree, it is a movie good because it has scenes that we can just say are so watchable. Uh, Ellen McElduff, the "We Made You" death scene, that's just, even the way that scene is shot, like, obviously, Stephen King has said that he doesn't remember directing this film, which again is a delicious piece of lore about this movie, and that he was just doing too much cocaine and doesn't remember it.
And
But that,
drinking apparently very, very heavily too.
oh boy. Well, honestly, for how much he's denounced this film, it actually is shot quite well. And I think that death scene where she runs out into the parking lot, that performance is some kind of, it's like a meta, captivating, just totally surprising performance. And then the back and forth between her and that truck, it's like there's actually some skill there to really heighten up that moment where she gets run over by the truck. And
I do like that scene. I agree with you. I like that scene. My issue, I hated that it goes back to the aliens. It's not really her versus the truck, right? Because something's controlling the truck. The truck is merely a puppet here, so the whole "we made you" is undermined by the fact that they're not betraying us. Technology is not turning against us. It's being turned against us, which is just slightly different.
ladies and gentlemen, that is correct. That is fair to say. But I would say that what would I say here? I just want to take the prosecution's face in my hands and go, you gotta let go. You have to let go of
That's
the
not
aliens.
my job.
If you couldn't read, you wouldn't know they were there.
Curses.
Curses. In a weird way, I almost feel like the machines, in a way, their performance, would it be the first movie that was ruined by Skrull in the first moment and then redeems itself everywhere else in this film? So, does one intro card ruin a film, ruin everything about it? I would say no, ladies and gentlemen. I would say no.
Mr. Bangs, any further exhibits?
Yeah, I'm gonna list off some of the other movies that too. I mean, because I like trucks, I like action. So if you were interested in vehicular manslaughter stuff, even at this time, you'd have Mad Max, Road Warrior. You'd have Escape from New York, 1981. You'd have Death Race 2000 from 1975, and these are all wall-to-wall action vehicular things from the beginning of the movie actually to the end. They don't sit in a diner for most of the time. And then, of course, if you're really into trucks being scary, there's Duel from 1971, which actually captures what makes trucks scary. I read the story that before Stephen King filmed this movie, he rode his motorcycle from Maine to the studio so he could ride alongside semi-trucks on the highway to get a feel of how scary they are in close proximity, which I think is brilliant because trucks are scary as hell. Unfortunately, there's never a scene like that in this movie where a car is being rammed down by a truck. There's a tow truck, which is smaller and different from the 18-wheeler, but he never actually does a duel thing where a big ass truck is coming after you, which I think is the quality that makes trucks truly scary, not seeing them from the outside into a diner. And with that, I will rest.
But I would object to that argument because I don't think that this movie is intending to make these machines scary. In fact, I feel like these machines, we're supposed to be rooting for them. I think Stephen King has a very passionate love for inanimate objects, and we see it at very it's never been demonstrated more than in Maximum Overdrive. Because I think we have our main inanimate characters, of course, the Joker truck, but just the love and attention that is given to all these little scenes. I think the montages of these attacks by machines are probably honestly some of the best scenes in the entire movie because they clearly were given time and space and thought through, and usually they end with a laugh. I don't think that this movie is going for a scary effect at all. I I'm thinking of course, like the ATM. I'm thinking of the vending machine. I'm thinking of the steamroller. I'm thinking of the,
I
we
love
don't
the
see that.
steamroller. So no objections to the steamroller at all.
The steamroller can stay.
If this was 2 hours of children being hit by vehicles, I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be watching Maximum Overdrive.
And even the fact that just the amount of explosions and the amount of cars that are in this film, I think that sort of feeling is like, these aren't supposed to be some overarching bad guys. It's almost as if it's two gangs. Is how it's like a bit of a Sharks and a Jets, if you will. Follow me. Maximum Overdrive is really West Side Story. And really, Estevez is just in love with Truckee, but he just can't admit it,
When you're a truck for life.
Oh, more songs. Let's go. So I would say I don't think that was the intent of the way that these inanimate objects were meant to be personified in this film. And I think the actual intent came across extremely well and is extremely watchable.
Mr. Bangs has rested, so Mrs. Marsh, you may proceed with any further exhibits that you have.
So I would like to bring up, I think what's already come out from our arguments, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is that I believe Maximum Overdrive is one of those movies that could be said to be saved, to be made a great movie by the evil characters in it. And I'm putting the evil characters in quotes because, as I've said, I don't think this movie thinks the machines are evil. In fact, the way these characters are set up are human characters. Most of them are dislikable. The introduction to most of them is for us to hate them, which seems intentional when I watch this movie, and I think is why you aren't supposed to be rooting for the humans. I think you're supposed to be rooting for these machines to actually overcome these people and actually destroy them. And in that regard, I think the movie is kind of brilliant because that is the struggle between this entire film is like, we don't like ourselves. Like, we are actually rooting for our own destruction. And that, I think, is a really deep, deep message from this film. So I think the focusing on whether these characters, these actors are watchable or have any kind of depth, I don't think they're supposed to. And I think that's really something that is very topical for today, as we've seen, we've basically enslaved these machines. So, whose side should we really be on here?
I think that's a really interesting point about it. Unfortunately, I think Stephen King has gotten his own way because you see in the short story, the trucks do win. At least it's kept vague at the end. It ends with the humans being stuck pumping gas for them and kind of hypothesizing that they're going to be enslaved for life. So it's interesting that if the movie is actually on the truck's side, why did it change the ending to where the humans objectively win? I mean, the truck gets destroyed and then the UFO gets destroyed and the whole phenomenon's over. The short story, I agree with you, matches up with what you're saying, but the movie completely undoes it. And I think by making a happy ending, which is what we get in this, it's undoing some of those great themes that are present in the short story that you're describing.
But I think, does it even feel like the end of this movie is a happy ending? Like, our characters get on the boat and go out into the ocean, and it's not a triumphant ending. It isn't like, I don't think there's even really like a hurrah moment, really. Like, the big moment at the end of the movie is when Truckee finally meets her demise. In glorious, glorious spectacle. And so I really do think that this movie, this is on the side of the machines. And to be fair, I think we cannot understand the inner workings of Stephen Hawking's cocaine brain.
Stephen King!
We can't understand.
I knew it!
Stephen Hawking does a lot more cocaine.
He was also involved in the making of this movie. That's how they brought the aliens in. That was Stephen Hawking.
It's all connected.
But Stephen King, we can never truly know what sort of brilliant, how sometimes people's best work comes out when they are the most messed up. I would argue that there's something deep down inside that Stephen King's been exploring, which is that he loves inanimate objects, but finally he had the courage, the artistic vision to let himself out and be creatively free, make this movie. And then once he sobered up, he was horrified at what it revealed
God.
about himself, which is that he loves Truckee. Stephen King loves Truckee. This is a love song to Truckee. And you know what? Call me crazy, but I get it. I'm there. I also love Truckee. Do you, ladies and gentlemen, love Truckee? Ask yourselves deep down inside.
Hmm.
Do you have any further exhibits, or would you like to rest on that?
I think I would also just like to bring up the soundtrack of this film. I think the soundtrack, there can be a lot forgiven for a film that does have good pacing. And I think that as the prosecution has brought up, there are some scenes where we are in the gas station with our characters that does go a little slower, but I would argue that that is to sort of prepare ourselves for basically the 180 miles per hour that is the rest of this film. I mean, if this film was constantly the action that we see like 60% of the time, I think actually the film would probably be unwatchable. So those moments of taking our time at the gas station, I think are our chance to take a breath of air. So I think it actually helps overall the pacing of this film. And back to AC/DC. I think the underscoring of some of these scenes, it's just flawlessly executed action is what I would say. Like this movie is it's so fantastic to see a director be able to spend some real money on some fantastic practical effects. And I know I'm biased and I'll always just really gravitate towards any movie that really puts its money where its mouth is and just says, we're really doing all of these things with real cars, with, with having like the bridge that goes up. That's not necessary, but they did it
Objection,
anyway.
they didn't build that bridge. It was already there.
But they didn't need to put so many. How many cars were destroyed in doing this movie? How many cars?
Or mainly lemons.
How many trucks when they were driving down that highway? I mean, to their credit, they definitely filmed in some like rural part of the country, so I'm sure it didn't take that much money to shut down the highway. But still, there was so much in this movie that went over the top, practically speaking, over the top.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this movie benefits from going, if they had not gone all out on those practical effects, I don't think this movie would be a good movie.
They could have put some practical effects into the UFO or the comet, though. I mean, just a little something at the beginning, a little stop motion or something. Call up David Allen.
Look, can we forgive an intro card? Please, jury, I'm on my knees. What if we edited the movie? I'll put it into iMovie right now.
The cocaine cut.
Okay.
You're not supposed to do
Cocaine
that.
cut.
You're not supposed to. It's bad. It hurts
Oh.
people.
I believe the movie we have is the cocaine cut, Mr. Bangs.
Very possible.
Well, the trailer for this movie was definitely the cocaine cut, and everybody should watch that.
It's
The one
just,
that he introduces himself.
Yes, that
Yeah.
one.
Oh, I missed
Good
it.
stuff.
You just have to look into his eyes as you're watching that trailer. You can't look away. Otherwise, you have bad sex for a year.
Oh no.
Some people, that's a step up.
I was gonna say that's so true. Even bad sex is still sex, so
Right.
That's the joke, Ben. Come on.
Yeah, that is. So for me though, I mean, okay, I like AC/DC, they're fine. But AC/DC is Stephen King's favorite band, so he expressed that by making them do every single song in the soundtrack. In fact, several of them, I think they basically write an album for this, and it's just like, I don't know, it's like an 8-year-old's expression of my favorite band. They're gonna do every song.
But see, isn't that just... ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I will have to admit that my love for this movie, not just for the film itself, but for the lore around it, there's just more and more about this movie that just like makes me fall in love with it more and more after every year. And just the fact Ladies and gentlemen, I didn't know that AC/DC was Stephen King's favorite band. That just made me enjoy
Yeah, you
this
do.
movie even more. My gosh, it's such a pleasure to be here defending this film. Even if you throw this film in jail, you can never convince me. That's how much I love this film.
Did you know he originally wanted Bruce Springsteen to be the lead? And when Emilio Estevez was pushed on him, that's apparently when he lost passion for the project. That early in. It's like, what performance did you think you were gonna get out of Bruce Springsteen, Steven? Like, are we guys just gonna hang out and drink and do coke for 2 months? I kind of think that's what was gonna happen. But before we send this over to the jury, I'll let the jury decide whether this movie is so bad it's good. Can something be so hot it's cold? Can it be so up it's down? Is quality a globe you can go all the way around and come back out the other side? Or is it a spectrum where you go right off the edge like Christopher Columbus should have? Let everyone chew on that.
Okay. Yeah, let's all chew on that for a little bit. Both sides have rested their cases. The attorneys will now present their closing arguments. Mr. Maynard Bangs, you may begin.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is Maynard Bangs' top 5 appliances that came to life in Maximum Overdrive that we didn't get to see in no particular order. Number 1, the world's smoke detectors go off incessantly, day and night, even if the batteries are removed. They each have to be physically smashed to stop the ceaseless wailing. And in a similar vein, number 2, every alarm clock on Earth goes silent. Millions are late to work. Others never arrive at all. Number 3, every computer mouse and touchpad on Earth simultaneously inverts their axis. So you have to move it up to go down and vice versa. And it drives everybody nuts. Number 4, VCRs and film projectors all begin playing backwards. So it spoils the ending of every single movie for you. And number 5, calculators just subtly do math wrong. Like, not wrong enough that you're going to notice, but just wrong enough for you to fail all your homework and taxes and stuff.
No.
And thank you, Your Honor. That's all.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Marsh, please present your closing argument.
Now, the prosecution, my closing arguments are in response to the prosecution's argument that this movie is so bad it's good. I disagree. I believe this movie is a classic example of camp done right. This movie knows it's over the top. I don't think this movie is delusional about what it is. I don't think it would be possible for this movie to be delusional about what it is, as demonstrated from the fact that it itself gives different explanations for why these machines have come to life. I believe that this movie, to accept it as camp, to accept the fun elements of it, to accept how watchable it is, all of the practical effects, I would just really think, was this an enjoyable experience to watch from beginning to end? And I would have to say, search your hearts for that answer. Did this campy comedy horror movie creep into your heart? Just go with the feeling.
Thank you both. Members of the jury, Mr. Dylan J. Schlender, Mr. Big Ben Haslar, and Mr. Don't Make Me a Widow on My Wedding Day, Ryan Luis Rodriguez. You've all heard the facts concerning this case. It is now up to you to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. The bailiff will escort you to the deliberation room to render your verdict.
Right this way? I was held captive at a truck stop once, but for me, it was just a bunch of truckers braiding my hair the entire time. Would have preferred the machines.
Huh.
Don't go to this truck stop anymore, Ben.
The bailiff.
Bailiff!
Well, fun case. I will say off the bat, I do not agree with the defense that this is a good movie. But I don't know that I think that's a bad one. There is a lot there with its intentionality that's set early, especially with that scene. So you know where your suspension of disbelief is. You know what to expect early on. So a lot of those kind of ring true for me, although I do the prosecution speaking my language with inconsistent logic. Especially for someone of Stephen King's caliber, you don't have to give me a lot, and you can let me guess at a lot, but to like just change the rules at a whim, that's frustrating. Dylan, what did you think of the cases?
I thought there were two good cases, and it's kind of funny because a lot of Maynard's argumentation really does rest on those title cards, as it should, because like you said,
I'm not convinced he hated the film.
We go from this instant, like Stephen King usually does, like more of this soft magic kind of thing where you don't really understand how things work, but that's the reality you're living in. And to introduce this idea of like there's this comet with aliens that's controlling the machines, or maybe it's like this radiation that's doing, and it is a little confusing because the short story is actually remarkably strong. I think about it sometimes. The ending, he's pumping gas, he sees the plane fly over, and he thinks like, God, I hope there's people in there, but there probably aren't. And like that's the end. It's a bummer. And this one is like a very decidedly happy ending. So it is interesting that Stephen King, who, as the defense pointed out, constantly complained about people meddling with his work and not getting it. He has the opportunity to show him how it's done, which is, I believe, he actually said that he really wants to do that, and he kind of fumbles.
Do you think he's allowed to, though, given that he's the original author? Like, it's him.
Well, everyone's allowed to fumble his work too, though. That's the point. You know what I mean? It's just like he's not.
It's more of a debatable question if someone else screws it up, though.
Yeah, I mean, right? he could be just, but in his defense, he's just as critical of himself because of this movie. Like, he decidedly does not like it. I think about the other one-time directors we've discussed. Like Dan Aykroyd with Nothing But Trouble. I mean, like Nothing But Trouble. Now there's a atrocious
and unfortunately I remember making it.
Yeah, the Maximum Overdrive just kind of strikes me as more of like this 2-star to torture the analogy, it stays in its lane, you know what I mean? and like right you said, it's like when you look at that intentionality and the way Emily was able to defend that, it's like you kind of know what you're getting going into it, but Maynard brought up a lot of good points about the inconsistency, and it's just the pacing is okay. Like, I don't know. I'm kind of torn.
The pacing's good.
On the pacing. I think it's okay, but I think there's too much going on, like with the kid coming from the little league field, and then like they're escaping to this marina, and it's like either keep it all on the diner. And, I just feel like there's just too much going on story-wise. I would have liked it to be a little more contained, but anyway, let's hear from Ryan.
Luis Rodriguez, where are you at?
I have a confession to make. I own this movie.
You own lots of movies.
No, but I mean, I bought it because it has a commentary from Jonah Ray, so I did it for a Patreon exclusive, but I kept it. I didn't sell it, which is what I usually do with movies I don't care for. I usually go to the record store and sell them for $5 a piece. I am split right down the middle on this. I think this is a perfect example. This is the platonic ideal of a gentleman's five, where I agree with everything that Maynard was saying, but I also agree with the sentiment that Emily was putting out there. And it's one of those things that I don't think it's not well shot. I think that it has its own moments of kineticism. It definitely shows that he's a first-time director and that he probably shouldn't direct again. But at the same time, it's not a movie that I hate, and it's not one of those so bad it's good. Like there's moments that I legitimately enjoy as a connoisseur, like the vending machine shooting a guy in the balls with a can of soda.
That's
quite possibly one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my entire life. I fucking love that so much. So I am really torn right now because I guess it's dumb to explain it all that it's aliens and then not even stick to that for the rest of the movie. But I don't really care. If you have not enough ideas or too many, I think that it's about the same. It equals out.
Would you care to lock in?
Sure, I'll lock in. Just to be gentlemanly, I'll lock in. I'll say this is not guilty of being a bad movie.
All right.
I see you're not guilty, and I raise you one guilty.
Any reason why? Which argument? Like,
because honestly, it's just it really does come down to like the pacing, the acting, the AC/DC soundtrack is interminable. I'm sorry, it's just not great. I mean, the best thing about this is like the trucks like kind of doing stunts, but like they don't get to do a lot. Like Maynard said, it was like a tow truck chasing him. It's like you never have this intensity. Like there's not like one like shot of like two 18-wheelers like smashing into like one car. I don't know. I just at the end of the day, it's just not particularly enjoyable. It's particularly forgettable. I couldn't really tell you much more about it than that. And then just the logic points, it's just like, yeah, it just tilts it all the way to bad. I'm sorry. Well, I'm not sorry. It's bad. It's up to you, Ben.
Well, the logic is harder for me to get over. But I like, since the movie doesn't care, it's hard for me to care about it too. This is a comedy movie. I think if you came in expecting a Stephen King horror movie, which I think a lot of people just coming in blind might, you're gonna be like, I just wasted my evening. It's a comedy movie, and it sets that tone early. You're laughing, you're having fun. I don't love it, but I think it's just north of guilty. So I'm going to go not guilty. So let's go tell that very handsome judge.
Mr. Foreman, have you reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor. In the case of the People versus Maximum Overdrive, we find the defendant not guilty of being a bad movie.
That was a truck sound.
Well, I just saw the truck drive right through the corner.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, very loud, blood-soaked mud flaps. It was terrible.
That's more of a motorcycle, but whatever. It's all good. The verdict is so rendered. Maximum Overdrive is hereby free to go, but if Stephen King is to make another movie, he should really cool it with the booger sugar. Court is adjourned.
I disagree.
More booger sugar.
This is Suboptimal Prime, reporting to you live from outside the Wheels of Justice. I'm not a fan of this movie. It makes all of us trucks look like violent maniacs, but some of us are actually heroes. Maynard Bangs, would you care to share your thoughts on the jury's verdict?
I sure would, Suboptimal. You're not one of those hero trucks, though, right? Because you're
No,
suboptimal. Okay, all right. I just want to know that there are good ones, but they're not
He's a
you.
good guy.
That's right. You don't have
Uncle
blood-soaked mud flaps, do you?
Not anymore.
I think this was a great case. I think we got to really nitpick the logic of stuff, but also talk about, the bigger messages of camp and intentionality. So I can live with the jury's verdict on this one. I'll sleep tonight.
All right. I won't. Not without some Ambien.
Well, because you're a truck.
That's true. Thank you. Well, actually, I'm an alien who disguises himself as a truck.
What?
It's all intellectually distinct.
An alien controlling an alien who disguises himself as a truck.
Oh, man. I'm also a lawnmower. Here comes Emily Marsh.
Cut off the booger sugar, guys.
Excuse me, can we get a word on how you feel about this Prime verdict?
I feel glad that I got to say my piece. The jury was fair, the judge was fair, the deliberation. But I would be remiss if I didn't disclose that, I am compromised and I am biased in this case because I've been seriously seeing Maximum Overdrive since 2009. So, she's always been beautiful to me. Is she perfect? Of course she's not. But, when I just look into Truckie's eyes, I just see a movie that I could watch over and over and over again. And I'm glad that, maybe we don't all agree that she's as beautiful as I think she is, but at least she's not in jail. So thank you very much, and glad to have said my piece. We're going home tonight.
Thank you very much. That's all we have from the courthouse today. Let's go back to the studio for post-trial analysis. Roll... forget it.
Oh, he's
Why the Green
depressed.
Goblin, though?
That's so sad.
The Green Goblin is the biggest question I have. Like, why? Why that?
Because they got permission from Marvel to use it.
Yeah, I think it was just available and it looked cool.
Honestly, for all of these things, because it's
cool.
Stephen King and Stephen King is such a wild card, I'd honestly believe that he had a dream and he was like, that's what it's got to be.
You're right, because that the fire hoses in The Shining are that. Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, that does make sense. And somewhere there was a psychic kid, but we didn't get to see him in the movie. But he was somewhere. Some alcoholic writer was somewhere. So Emily, what's been keeping you busy? What have you been up to lately?
Oh, man. Well, honestly, I have the best thing happening recently, which I've been kept busy by actually getting to work and be a part of a bunch of people's passion projects, which has been super, super awesome. one that I just got to be a part of that actually, if people check out on my social media, they can check it out. There's this really sweet project called Lily Pad Academy, and it's basically for kids, and it's just basically educating for neurodivergent kids, for all kids, like ways to basically, help each other out and live together and understand each other. And it's like the passion project of a teacher, and this is like what she's spent all of her time preparing, and I'm so glad I got to be a part of it. So that's on my Instagram. And
Share
then
that
I'm
Instagram.
actually
What's the Instagram handle people can find?
at emily.k.marsh, because spoiler alert, there's a lot of Emily Marshes out there. So
No.
needed to put in the middle initial. Yep,
Aw.
sad but true. Yeah, I feel like a lot of shame that even my Gmail account that I got way back in 2009, I still had to put numbers in there.
Wow.
Even back in the
Oh.
day.
I wonder how those less famous Emily Marshes feel now. Like it was people just like pinging them out
You
of
at
the
least
blue.
got the 69 though, right?
Oh.
No, that one was taken.
Ah!
First
Oh
one
no,
taken.
I think there's 6 Emily Marshes on IMDb, and I've had to take away articles that are about me, and they've been credited to the other Emily Marshes.
Oh,
So
no.
if those Emily Marshes are out there listening, I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill
Oh
all
my
of you.
God.
I'm just kidding. But am I? Am I Emily Marsh too? You don't know.
Hopefully they
don't know.
don't disappear. You'll be the first suspect. But
Emily
I mean,
L. Marsh.
the middle names are getting are very popular now, or just the middle initials. Schlenzo loves his middle initial.
Dylan J. Schlender.
That's true. I heard on NPR that people that use their middle initials are actually marginally more successful than their peers.
Really? Well, that does make sense. That since I changed my Instagram handle, I have been getting more successful. So now I know what to credit it to.
Hey, there you go.
It's more
absolutely.
intellectual.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna have to try it. I gotta figure out what my middle name is.
You got to figure out what your middle initial is, though.
I know. I don't know.
Straight.
I'll get back to you.
X.
Ooh,
Maynard X.
I'm not cool enough for an X. I can't pull off the X. No.
You're smooth enough for it, though.
Maybe Z.
Ooh, I kind of like it.
Yeah, I know. Z bangs. Z bangs. Z bangs. He moves. He moves. I'm sold on it now. So we'll check out your social media for that. Anything else going on for social media wise stuff?
Yeah, I was trying. Well, if for some reason anybody happens to be in Austin, I guess in a couple weeks, I'll be at South by Southwest with another educational puppet project. So
Nice.
2025 has been all puppets all the time, which has been fantastic.
That's the way it should be.
And
Mhm.
also for in the world things, Shudder's Greatest Of documentary, I actually got to say a couple things in that documentary. And actually, if anybody tells me which episodes I'm in, because I haven't watched the whole thing yet, and so I just keep getting pinged from people that they're like, I saw you in the documentary, and I'm like, what episode? I haven't gotten to me yet. So
I'm on
check it out
episode
and
2 of
find me.
season 2, and I haven't gotten to you yet, but I will
Okay.
ping you if I
Ryan
find
will
Please-
definitely let you know.
Please do. Please do. I need to sit down and watch it, but my husband doesn't like horror movies.
Oh.
And so,
I know.
what's the series? It's called The Best of
Horror's Greatest.
Horror's
Greatest.
Okay,
Mhm.
cool.
Mm-hmm.
Good
I
series.
wonder what quotes they took on like what monsters. Hopefully something about like the crawling eye, maybe.
Well,
Or
I
Truckee.
definitely. You know what? It was honestly being a part of that documentary was so much fun, but was also so terrifying because we basically had like 10 horror movies that I'd like pre-selected I was cool to talk about. And then we proceeded to talk about them like rapid fire. And it was great and it was so much fun. But by the end of that hour, I had sweated through my entire shirt.
Mhm.
And if anybody had asked me, if anybody had been like, hey, what did you say at the beginning of that hour about this movie? I'd be like, I have no idea. I've honestly blacked out. I don't remember a thing of what I was saying. I just kept talking. So
You could
I
identify with
definitely,
Stephen King in that way.
you know what? There's a lot of reasons why I love Truckee. So now we know another one. Sometimes you just put things on tape and you don't remember. Wait, no, strike that.
Oh, no.
No, there is a
Deleted,
Stephen
deleted.
King episode, and I don't recall Maximum Overdrive ever being mentioned. Surprise, surprise.
What about the
Yeah, well-
Mangler? He's the Mangler too, isn't he? Is he
The
the washing machine that kills people?
That doesn't
Mhm.
show up either.
Okay, I don't think, but I don't think that's not King, though, right? Schlenzo is just another guy who brings things to life.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a King thing.
You don't know the Mangler?
No.
You should
not
recommend the
intimate with
Mangler.
that.
But also, guys, I would be remiss if I didn't say, like, the reason that I do really love this movie is I went to acting school, and my acting teacher's claim to fame was that he was in Maximum Overdrive.
Oh, you should have led with that.
Yeah.
Well, now you're going to ask me, oh, who was he in Maximum Overdrive?
He's
And I'll
Pat
get to
Hingle.
tell you, oh, he's one of the truck drivers. And you'll go, which one? And I'll be like, the one with the beard. And that will not narrow it down. Yeah, he's like one of the truck drivers who inexplicably is just hanging out at the truck stop. And then halfway through, he gets killed off because honestly, in the movie, it feels like somebody told them, they're like, we have too many people on set. We cannot fit everybody in this shot right now. Just kill them.
Craft service is killing us, right?
Well, I think they were just kind of like, let's just pretend there's been a lot of truck drivers meandering around here so we can get a bigger body count. And it's like, how many truck drivers just kind of hanging out here? Have you not seen the explosions? But enough about that movie. So we're going to check out your Instagram, Emily K. Marsh, and we'll see all the cool puppet stuff that you're up to.
See you on that documentary.
And we will see you on that documentary.
Ping me.
And everyone will, you'll get like 1 million messages now about which episode it is. You'll never stop hearing about it.
Like the same message on endless repeat. Episode 17, episode 17, episode 17.
Wow, what if that one's right? Now, we always ask for recommendations from our guests for movies that you think people should see. So what is a movie you think people should see?
Oh, I think, everybody should go see, this is a controversial recommendation. I think everybody should go see Emilia Perez. I don't know
what it is.
The person or the movie?
Maybe up for an Oscar.
I was going to say this is a hot take. This is like a new recommendation. I don't think I liked it, but I'm glad I watched it with my eyeballs. And that's what I would say to everybody else.
That's most of our recommendations, actually.
I recommend movies I don't like all the time.
Yeah, we don't insist they be good. I think they're more like reviews. I think is what I realized recently. They're a little bit more like reviews that are like, and you watch it too, make up your mind. What did you like about it, if you'd say one? What really captured your imagination?
I think, and the reason I would recommend that everybody watch it is because my friends who were like, we're going to watch it. And I was like, why are you saying it like that? It's an Oscar nominated film. Why are you saying like, we're going to watch this? And I'm really glad that they said, don't look up anything about it. So I went into Emilia Perez. If anybody's, I'm sure there's been some talk now about certain aspects of it, but I'm glad I went into it. Didn't know what it was going to be. And that was really enjoyable because it's very surprising. Like I said, don't know if I liked it, but it was incredibly surprising, and I did not expect it to be what it was. And that's so rare these days, to actually go see a movie that surprises you. It's nice.
Well, at least when it's pleasantly surprising. That's nice. But I'll have to say, usually we tend to watch some of the Oscar movies.
Oh, Ryan watches them for us.
Oh, no, Ryan watches everything.
I've seen them all this year. Yeah.
Yeah, you see?
Yeah.
Oh, well, you guys should do what I do, which is where I say at the beginning of Oscar season, I'm like, I'm going to watch every Best Picture nomination. And then I fail at varying degrees of doing that. But then because I've told so many people I'm going to watch all of them, then I lie and find ways to say like one thing about them, like, oof, Emilia Perez, controversial.
Yeah. I liked it,
Tell me about it.
I saw it.
Was a movie.
The Brutalist? Brutal. Yeah. Long,
very long.
Very long movie. Intermission.
Oh, gosh.
Long. Yeah, long. I didn't even have to watch it.
Who's letting people make movies nowadays? My God.
Seemingly
Felicity
anyone.
Jones doesn't even show up in the first half. It's a crime.
But sometimes they just don't release them, which reminds me of my recommendation. Can you believe this Stephen King fellow is still allowed to make movies, despite nearly costing a man his eyesight? They just don't let him direct anymore, but his books still get turned into stuff, like my recommendation today, the 2024 adaptation of Salem's Lot. It follows a refreshingly non-alcoholic writer, for a change, who returns to his hometown to find it overrun with vampires. It's been a while since I read the book, but this stuck to most of the plot points that I could remember, which wasn't many. It looked good and it stayed in its lane as a very satisfying vampire movie. Barlow, kept the sort of traditional monstrous look. And I guess the studio was a little clever to try to sneak this one out on streaming in October before Nosferatu hit theaters in December. Not that it got much attention anyway, despite a lot of stink made about how it might not get released to exploit a tax loophole. That didn't really help generate it much momentum. The cast is a veritable who's who of supporting character actors, everyone from William Sadler, a Stephen King property mainstay, to Spencer Treat Clark, who looks exactly like that little kid from Gladiator, but all grown up. It's freaky. And although it bolsters an R rating, that is mostly just for the gore and child murder. So I'd say this is a good one for the whole family, as long as you're a family that tolerates gory child murder. But don't worry, no boobies or bad words, just good old-fashioned grisly gory child murder. A return to wholesome family values. Salem's Lot is currently streaming on Max, but you better hurry because they could change their mind any day and try to collect on that tax loophole. I know, I barely got it out. Ryan, what is your recommendation?
My truck-commendation this week.
Truck-commendation! It should be a truck-commendation!
My truck-commendation this week is an outstanding film from last year, Azazel Jacobs' His Three Daughters. It stars three women that I absolutely love. Carrie Coon, Elizabeth Olsen, and Natasha Lyonne as, yes, three daughters stuck in an apartment where their father slowly dies in the next room. The sisters spend most of their time bickering over past indiscretions and perceived slights in a way that is intensely relatable. And while I don't have biological sisters, it's awfully close to my own relationship with my brother. You come to a film like this for the performances and the nuance of the script, and both are absolutely stellar in this case. The weird thing is, because of how much time we spend on a singular set and the sisters' literal separation from their father, I was amazed to discover that it was not based on a play. Not to say that it feels stagey, it feels intimate and grounded. But in case you're wondering, yes, the his in His Three Daughters eventually appears in the film towards the end, but I'm not going to spoil what happens thereafter. His Three Daughters is currently streaming on Netflix. Yuck.
It's probably related to My Three Sons.
Who plays the father? Is it like Brian Cox or something?
Nope.
Brian Cox is not in every movie, despite what you think.
But he is in every McDonald's commercial, though.
He's also in every McDonald's. A little bit.
No.
He bilocates to all of them.
Schlenzo, what have you got for us?
Well, Maynard, some people are saying that 2024 was the best year for movies since at least 2021. And I'm sure movies like my recommendation, Blink Twice, are the reasons for such lofty praise. A handsome billionaire and his army of toadies bring a bevy of beauties to a secluded island for what seems to be a non-stop partying weekend and a lot of incredibly tortured conversation. Naturally, there's more than meets the eye. As the good times unfold, a sinister underbelly is exposed, and our protagonists find themselves as confused as they are in danger. This was pretty good. It was a solid cast, and I enjoyed the ending. Very solid. Got a little long in tooth, and the trajectory was readily apparent, but there's a there. I eagerly await the sequel, Blink Thrice. Currently streaming on Amazon Prime. The real Prime, not that fake Prime that actually wants you to pay or get a subscription or something. I'd also like to point out that this film originally had a very controversial title that first-time director Zoe Kravitz wasn't allowed to use, and I'm going to read it here, so if you have sensitive ears, tune out or fast forward a bit. And that title was Blood-Soaked Mudflaps.
Oh, God, that's a great title.
Yes!
You got me.
Still evocative.
And you said more than meets the eye, or the one of them's Transformer, maybe.
It's rated G, right?
Except the mud flap scene. No one will be seated during the blood-soaked mud flap scene. Big Bun, send us on home.
Oh, man,
the way Maximum Overdrive was structured kept reminding me of a zombie film, and there was one in particular that my mind kept coming back to, 1978's Dawn of the Dead. Granted, most zombie films have the same kind of structure, so I don't know why this one in particular, if you know me better than I know myself, so congratulations. Zombie and zombie films are a dime a dozen these days, and although they've been dying down a little bit, And while I like some of the modern takes on the genre, every time I watch Dawn, it feels apart from the rest. It definitely has some silly moments in it that detract from the rest of the film, but I get sucked in whenever I watch it. If there were a zombie epidemic, you can bet some people would treat it like a carnival. You can be sure some people would loot and become possessive of what, and we would 100% go against other groups of survivors because they have more than we do. I mean, not me specifically. I'd send Dylan and Maynard out while Ryan and I heat up some Franks and beans. And for anyone who's been to the mall recently, it was really weird how full circle it all feels, how sparsely populated and like massive crowds are just like sort of shuffling around these huge halls, looking longingly at those Dillards and recycled DVD stores, remembering dimly of the days that this was the place to be. But the film is still a smart take on consumerism while also being a neat character study.
I think malls will come back.
The reason it was so evocative is because there's a rumor that George Romero stealth-directed many scenes in Maximum Overdrive.
Really?
That's
Wow.
Emily, is that true?
Yeah.
You know everything about this movie.
You know, I can neither confirm nor deny because I really want this to be Stephen King's baby. You know what? Maybe Stephen King led to the situation, thereby they could self-direct themselves, but it was still his brilliance to step back and do some cocaine while they, actually did the directing. But it's still his genius. So.
No, Emily, clearly Stephen King self-directed Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah. There you go.
There we go.
I choose
Now
that to
there
be
it
true.
is.
I just figured Stephen maybe was behind George's, grabbing his hips, maybe, and sort of directing him, or like vice versa, But with that, we are all at a show. But we want to thank our guest Emily K. Marsh for joining us. Thank you so much, Emily.
Such a pleasure to be here, guys. Such a pleasure.
We're gonna have you back, and you can explain more of your favorite movies to us. We hope, and we hope everyone else will join us then too, as the reels of justice keep turning.
Count it.
We made you!
Please follow us on Twitter at Reels of Justice, Instagram Reels of Justice, and Facebook.com/Reels of Justice.